Chapter 75. How can this be? How can you just sit there and see if you have the right to breathe my air? Looking at me, no hint of recognition, making you regret is now my mission. It had rained for days, so Diego used the small forest road instead of going down the muddy cliffside when he came home after picking up some spare parts. In the wet ground he saw a tire track he didn't recognize. Cautiously, he drove towards his barracks. When he saw the little 125cc bike standing there, he smiled. So much for never wanting to see him again. He parked his motorcycle next to hers and took off his helmet. He put a hand on her engine. Still hot, she had just arrived. He went to his barracks, still not seeing her anywhere. Then he heard a banging door. She had used his porta-potty. Without saying anything, he held the door open so she could enter. When they were inside, they both took off their leather clothes. She said nothing. It was clear that something was wrong. He took milk and butter out of the fridge and handed her the packages. She put them on the table. Diego brought a crisp bread, and they sat down to eat. I saw one of them today. He stopped chewing. Suddenly he was there on the tram, as if nothing had happened, as if he has the right to be on the same tram as I am. I just stared at him. I couldn't think of anything to say or do. I was scared, I think, or just shocked. I don't know. It felt so unreal. You told me they were out again, but still, I didn't understand that they can be anywhere. That they can be where I am or where Kayvan is. It was horrible. I just stared at him. He didn't even see me, or he didn't recognize me. She stared at her shaking hands. Which one of them was it? She was startled when he spoke. She had somehow forgotten where she was, who she was talking to. The fair one, with eyes that dart around all the time. I don't know his name. I was at the trial, but I've forgotten almost all of it. Suppressed it all, I guess. Jari. Jari? That sounds Finnish. Yeah, he's from Finland. She frowned. But then he's an immigrant himself. He exhaled quickly in a short sniff. They differentiate between immigrants and immigrants. He ate the last piece of his crisp bread. What do you want me to do with him? Her eyebrows shot up high. How could you do anything at all? I don't know where he is now. It was the first time I saw him on that tram. He lives in Göteborgsposten. How do you know? She didn't finish her sentence. It didn't matter how he knew. Göteborgsposten. At least it was not that close to Johanneberg or Örgryte. Kayvan and she would not need to see him that often. But seeing him occasionally was more than enough. I want him to understand how badly he hurt me. I mean, Kayvan. I don't want him to get away with it as easily as he has. I can give him a good beating, tell him to stay away from you. He sounded as if they were discussing what to have for dinner. I don't want it to be like with Kayvan, no lifelong damage. I just want him to understand. He nodded. And I want to be there. He frowned. That complicates matters. It can be dangerous, he said slowly. She snorted. Less than a week ago, you were driving me to my death, so don't come and talk to me about how dangerous it can be. Instantly, he reached out across the table and grabbed her hand. I live a dangerous life, Jay. Being with me can be dangerous, but I promise you'll never get hurt on the back of my motorcycle. I can die in many ways, but I'm not going to kill myself driving. I didn't risk your life last time, even if you thought so. He continued to hold her hand tightly, long after he had fallen silent. It was important to him that she understood. When he thought he saw a change in her gaze, he released her. Okay, she said, I still want to be there. He sighed. You should know that I always fight clean. I never go several against one. I will not hold him while you hit or anything like that. Me hitting? I wouldn't do that. I'll never fight. He raised his eyebrows. Really? He turned his side toward her and showed the palm-sized bruise he had on his upper arm. She put her hand over her mouth. Did I do that? Among other things. Diego didn't bother showing her the bruises he had on his back and on the other arm. If you had hit me with just your fists, there wouldn't have been no problem, but you hit me with a helmet? That was pretty smart. Smart? Her eyes were stuck on the large bruise. I didn't think. I was just pissed at you. His mouth twitched. He got up and took the food off the table. If you're coming with me, you have to ride on the back of my motorcycle. We'll take one without a registration plate or with a fake plate. If something goes wrong, we have to get out of there quickly, and I don't want to risk that we lose each other or that someone notes down the number on your registration plate. Jenny looked at him, her heart pounding. She wanted to go with him, she really did. At the same time, his words scared her. What was she getting into? Everything had gone so fast. Jenny had ridden to Diego as soon as she got off the tram after seeing Jari. Now they were sitting here, on Diego's Cagiva, a sporty Italian motorcycle that was far from comfortable for the passenger, looking up at a 5-story building in Kortedala where Jari apparently lived. It felt unreal. Jari, living in an apartment like a normal person? The devil who had ruined her life lived in a boring, bricked apartment building in Kortedala. Diego opened his visor and turned his face towards her. She opened hers to hear him better. Jari and his friends often sit in the woods over there. He nodded at the patch of forest they had just passed, drinking liquor or sniffing glue or whatever they're into. She looked at the small stretch of forest on a slope down to the road below. Let's go see if they're there. He lowered his visor and drove off slowly. He drove along the road, crossed the sidewalk and a bit into the woods. They got off and walked. Oh, well, I'll be damned, Diego whispered. Jari was only a few 100 meters in front of them. He sat there by himself on a rock, drinking from a beer can. In front of him, he had a plastic bag from the grocery store. The situation was strange, weird. Jenny was just about to tell Diego that they should just go back when he quickened his steps and walked towards Jari. It took a while before he noticed him. Although Diego was closer to him, he saw Jenny first. He looked at her without any expression. Now she knew for sure. He didn't remember her. He had ruined her life. She had testified against him during the trial, and he didn't even remember her. Filthy swine. When he moved his gaze from Jenny to Diego, his indifferent, stupid expression changed to pure fear. He got up and started to run. Diego caught up with him, grabbed his shirt by the collar, dragged him back to the stone where he had been sitting. He threw him on the ground. Jari sat up quickly and pulled the grocer bag towards him as if it gave him security. Do you remember me? I didn't do anything. When Jenny heard his voice, a stone landed in her stomach. That voice, the voice who had called her a whore, the one she had heard during those nightmare moments when she had thought Keivan was dead. It had sounded more frightening then, but it made her nauseous even now. Maybe you haven't done anything right now, Jari, but not so long ago you and your mates, you fucking cowards, beat up a guy in Nordstan. You even went after his girl, you fucking dicks. Now Jari looked at her, and Jenny saw that he finally recognized her. Girls are with wogs or fucking whores, traitors! The words fell out of his mouth. Diego lifted him by the collar, punched him in the face. Jari's head flew back and he screamed. You should talk about women with respect. Unlike Jari, Diego spoke calmly, as if he was talking about the weather. Jenny didn't know which was most frightening, Jari's screaming or Diego's calmness. They are whores, Jari sobbed, and this time Diego hit him on the nose, from the bottom to the top. There was a cracking sound and blood splattered. Jari howled. Jenny heard her own heartbeat throughout her whole body, in her neck, in her head, in her armpits, in her stomach, pounding in her whole body. You should respect women and leave immigrants alone. Another hit and another. Jari's lip cracked and there was blood everywhere. Whores, wogs, they should go back to their own country. Jari seemed to repeat the learned phrases as mantras. Now Diego hit his stomach instead. Jari collapsed and Diego stopped. Do you want more? Jari coughed. They shouldn't be in our country. Diego lifted him up and hit him again. This time, Jari managed to get the plastic bag with the heavy beer cans in it from the ground. He swung it towards Diego's head. Jenny shouted a warning, but she didn't have to worry. Diego saw the bag well in advance and ducked. He hit Jari in the stomach again, then bent down, took the bag and threw it far down the slope towards the road. When he was busy with the bag, Jenny saw that Jari took something out of his pocket, something white. The blade shone. "Diego, knife!" Jenny screamed. It was not supposed to turn out this way. They had not come here for everything to be repeated. She didn't want to see Diego bleeding on the ground like Kavan had that night. Who would help them this time? She screamed when she saw Jari push the knife towards Diego's chest. Diego blocked it with his arm and moaned as the knife cut through the leather and into his arm. Now he got angry. He grabbed the handle of the knife and threw it towards Jenny. "Keep an eye on this one." He treated Jari as if it were a punching bag. He struck blow after blow with both right and left in his face and in his stomach. Thump, thump on Jari's body. Thump, thump in Jenny's body. She held the knife tightly. After Diego's latest assault, Jari lay on the ground shaking. "Stop," he sobbed. "Stop." Diego straightened up. "You're not going to call women whores and you'll leave immigrants alone, okay?" Jari didn't answer. Now Jenny had had enough. She walked over to Jari and grabbed his pants. It was a pair of jeans and she had a hard time unbuttoning them. "Jay, what are you doing?" Diego sounded worried. Funny. It was the first time she'd heard him worried. "I'm taking off his pants," she muttered as she continued fumbling. Couldn't he just lie still? She just wanted to... "Jay, I usually don't..." "I'm just taking his pants off!" The anxiety in Diego's voice had annoyed her. She became obsessed with the idea that she would get rid of those fucking jeans, but her fingers wouldn't obey her. Then she remembered the knife. She took it out, and suddenly Jari screamed. Okay, I'll never say whore again. I'll leave the wogs alone. Leave me alone, please." Jenny didn't listen to him. She was looking for the button to get the blade out on the stiletto. When she finally succeeded, she almost got both herself and Jari, since the blade was longer than she had expected. It was only luck that limited the damage to a small scratch on Jari's stomach, just above his waistband. He stopped screaming and started crying. He stopped wiggling and just lay there shaking. She finally managed to cut his pants. When she had cut far enough to get the pants off, she put away the knife and began to tear off his jeans. She was surprised when she noticed that they were wet. It was not that wet on the ground, was it? Then she noticed the stench. Jari had peed his pants out of fear. When she pulled his pants down to his knees, she saw that it was not just pee. There were brown stripes along his thighs as well. He had both peed and pooped himself. All the anger and rage Jenny had felt disappeared. He had peed himself like a small child. God, he was a small child. A pitiful little boy who sat drinking beer all by himself in a forest. She wanted to finish what she had started, so she pulled his pants off his feet and cut them in pieces. Now he can go on without pants. She was out of breath. "Come on, let's go." She and Diego sprinted towards the Cajiva. As they left on the motorcycle, Jenny cast one last glance at Jari. He lay where they had left him, bloody, in his own pee and poop, shaking from his crying. Diego drove at high speed past Alelyckan and Överskottsbolaget. Not that they were in a hurry. No one had seen them, and Jari would not call the police. But with a Cajiva between your legs and the adrenaline rushing through your body, it's hard to go slow. Diego was elated. This was way above his expectations. He hadn't been sure bringing Jenny was the right thing to do. If Jari had had friends with him, he would have called it off for tonight. It would have been too dangerous for her. But they had been lucky. Also, Jenny had been cooler than he could have ever imagined. It wasn't until she used a knife that Jari had finally broken down. That was brilliant. His elation lasted so long that he had been in his barracks for several minutes before he noticed that Jenny had not said a word since they came back. "How are you?" He tried to catch her eye. How was he? How was she? How could she possibly answer that? She noticed how energetic he was, what a kick he had gotten from the experience. "Do you have a first aid box? Did you get hurt?" He quickly scanned her from head to toe. "Not me." Jenny nodded at his arm. "You." He looked at his arm and only now remembered that he had been stabbed. "Yeah, right." He took a closer look. "My leather jacket took the biggest blow." He picked up a small box that lay on a shelf above the bed. He sat down at the table and Jenny cleaned his wound. She was careful, but still expected him to jolt when she washed her cut with alcohol. He didn't move a muscle. "This should probably be sewn, or at least glued." Nah, I have strong patches. Just push the edges of the wound together as much as you can. Jenny did as she said. When she was done, he got up and moved his arms in circles as if he were stretching his muscles. What are we going to do with the knife? She put the white stiletto on the table. I mean, he may have used it before in some beating. Maybe it's evidence, and now my fingerprints are on it, my DNA. She looked at him with a quick, nervous smile. I've watched too much CSI, haven't I? He shrugged. We can boil it. Then the DNA and stuff will disappear. After that, you can just throw it on my heap with the scrap metal out there. Happy to have something to do, she did what he suggested. He watched her boiling the knife. She would not be able to drive home in the state she was in. You're staying here tonight. You can take my bed if you want. Jenny nodded. Of course she would stay. After what she had done tonight, she had nowhere else to go. She belonged here now, in this world, the world where you beat and humiliate people. She shook her head and tried to get rid of the images in her head. It was a good idea to threaten him with a knife. She looked up. I just wanted to get his pants off. He moved so much that I couldn't unbutton them, so I just wanted to cut enough so I could get his pants off. Actually, that would have been enough. We didn't have to beat him, just let him walk home without pants. Her voice got weaker with each word. In the end, she stood quietly, staring at the boiling water. He isn't going to die, is he? Ha! Diego laughed. From some hits to his face and stomach? That wouldn't kill anyone. But when we left, he just lay there. What if he stays out all night? He might freeze to death. Yay, it's September. No one freezes to death on September night. Besides, he's probably home by now. I'm not so sure. He was very scared. Of course he was. When you came with a knife, he probably thought you were going to castrate him. Her eyes widened. Do you think he believed that? I would never do that. I just wanted to get rid of the damn pants. Did you really think so? If a girl waved a knife around near my crotch, I would have thought so. You know, I didn't think he'd be so pathetic. That night in January, he was a monster. Diego sighed. He is a monster, Jay. Have you forgotten what he did to Kevin? They kicked him in the head while he was lying on the ground. That's what kills people. And there were many of them against one. He is a monster when he has his friends with him. If you hadn't warned me about the knife, I would have a punctured lung now. He's pathetic to look at, but he is a monster. The discussion was ruining his good mood. You shouldn't think so damn much. He stood up and got the sleeping bag and the sleeping pad. Jenny looked at him. His black hair lay like a shiny rug down his back. The muscles in his arms moved under his skin as he stretched to reach the sleeping bag. He was beautifully sculpted with big muscles and sharp features. She wanted to be close to him. Most of all, she didn't want to think, just do something without thinking. She turned off the stove but left the knife in the hot water. She went up to him and put her lips on his. Diego didn't do anything. He didn't know what she was looking for. She was not really herself. She was in some kind of shock. He didn't want to take advantage of it. On the other hand, if she really wanted to... She grabbed his t-shirt by the collar and led him to the bed. There she lay down and pulled him down next to her. She kissed him again. This time he kissed back. She tucked her hands under his shirt. He grabbed her blouse and tore it open. Jenny gasped and he saw that she was scared. He let go and just lay next to her, waited. When she noticed how restrained he was, after all, she unbuttoned her jeans. He helped pull them off. She unbuttoned his and pulled them down a bit. They were in a hurry and didn't bother to take off the rest of their clothes. She still had her torn blouse, her bra and her socks on. Diego was still wearing all his clothes, but his jeans and underpants were pulled down to his knees. Jenny pulled him close to her, and with her legs round his hard ass, she pulled him towards her, and they had sex. Fast, instinctive, and with panting breaths, over and over again. It was so nice to not have to think, to just let the body take over. When she woke up the next morning, she was lying with her head on his chest. He was sleeping. At first, she felt satisfied. Then she realized what she had done yesterday, how she had humiliated another human being. She didn't want to think about it. She had to think of something else. Then she felt wetness and stickiness between her legs. Did she have her period? She was not supposed to have that now, was she? If she had been bleeding all over his bed, she would be so embarrassed. Then she realized what it was. Sperm. For the first time in her life, she had had sex with someone without using a condom. AIDS, chlamydia, pregnancy. What had she been thinking? She hadn't been thinking at all, of course. That had been the whole point. She moaned quietly. I've lost it. This is not me. She turned her head and looked up at the ceiling. Already yesterday she had felt it. How she had transgressed boundaries that were far from her ordinary self, her former self. She had gone too far in all areas. It was awful to think that thought, but she knew it was true. By humiliating Jari yesterday, by continuing when he asked her to stop, she had become like him. She had lowered herself to his level. The worst thing was that she had no idea how to get out of there.